The Democrats in D.C. have been and want to, at a much higher level, abolish our beautiful and successful suburbs.
Senate Republicans still trying to hash out the next round of coronavirus relief. Millions of folks have already received their final unemployment insurance checks.
Moments ago, he tweeted, quote, "I am happy to inform all the people living their suburban lifestyle dream that you will no longer be bothered or financially hurt by having low-income housing."
Good afternoon and welcome to Foursquare, the digital video show where politicals get together every week to chop up news of the week. This is a very special live edition of our show. Thanks for joining us. My name is Eugene Daniels. Joining me virtually here in just a second, as always, are my colleagues and co-hosts, Laura Barone Lopez, Tim Alberta, and Ryan Liza. I want to start, you guys. Hi, guys. I want to start with a tweet that kind of took over our mornings today. A lot of us spent a lot of time talking with people on Twitter about it, calling other people from President Trump. He tweeted, quote, "With universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote," with 3 question marks. He also has since pinned that tweet to the top of his Twitter. I want to start get your guys' kind of first reactions to that. And Laura, I'm going to start with you.
Right. So there's 2 things there. A majority of states, some 42 states, aren't doing technically universal mail-in voting. What they're doing is no excuse vote by mail, which actually a lot of states interchangeably refer to no excuse vote by mail as absentee voting, including Florida, where Trump himself lives now. So Florida is a good example because they actually got rid of the word absentee in order to not confuse voters. And what they do is no excuse, vote by mail. And again, fraud is extremely rare in terms of these no excuse, vote by mail. Only about 5 states or so are doing what Trump kind of considers universal vote by mail, which is proactively mailing ballots. And again, he doesn't have the power to delay the election. That's Congress.
Right. Ryan, what about you? This is something that has taken up a lot of oxygen, and I keep getting tweets of people saying, there's a distraction here, don't pay attention. But it's something that we kind of should be paying attention to, right, Brian?
Well, it's like a lot of Trump tweets that are truly eye-popping and outrageous. Previous ones include talking about reopening the First Amendment and making libel laws stricter, and any of the tweets in the kind of basket of like scary things that an authoritarian would say that don't reflect any understanding of the American Constitution, right? And he's been doing that now since 5 years ago this summer when he started running. So with these tweets, there's always a question of balancing the insanity of it and the kind of like anti-democratic part of it with it's also Trump and he'll probably forget about it tomorrow. But like Laura said, he can't change the date of the election. But it does suggest a sort of political panic on his part that he believes he's so down in the polls that what he's starting to focus on is undermining the legitimacy of the election. And as things get worse for him, we're only in July now. I wonder, what comes after this. And the fact that he pinned it to the top of the page is not going to be one of these tweets where it's like, I didn't mean that, and it goes away. He sort of doubled down on it by pinning it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to hear about some questions to the press secretary the next time that she's in front of reporters. Tim, I'll let you have the last word on this one.
Look, there are a lot of Republicans who have a lot of concerns about an unprecedented number of mail ballots being submitted this fall. And some of those concerns, I think, are valid just in terms of the capacity of some of these county governments to handle that influx of mail ballots in a way that they've never had to before. Do they have the manpower? Do they have the resources? Those concerns can be addressed, and in many places are being addressed with more funding and with obviously at the local level, there's only so much you can do, but that's why you have an ongoing conversation in Congress about money for this election. That's a part of the negotiations happening on the Hill right now. There is, I think, a desire among a lot of Democrats and even more quietly among some Republicans to say, look, because of this pandemic, if we are going to see, millions, maybe even tens of millions of mail-in ballots coming in early and coming in often, people walking into a clerk's office and doing early voting even in a way that they had not done prior to 2020, then we should, at the very least, have the resources that we need to be able to process all of this. You don't hear any of these people, no matter what their view of this situation, no matter how dire they view this situation to be, you don't hear them talking about postponing the election. You don't hear them sort of idly speculating about the possibility of pushing back an American presidential election, which has never been done. Abraham Lincoln didn't push back the election during the Civil War. FDR didn't postpone the election during World War II. This is nonsense. It's insane, as Ryan said, and we have to pay attention to it because it's the President of the United States suggesting it. But I think we also need to recognize that beneath all of this bluster, that our system is not inherently built to handle the sort of mass of mail voting that we're going to see this fall. And it's going to present some real problems. And there should be bipartisan solutions to address it.
Your home will go down in value and crime rates will rapidly rise. Joe Biden and his bosses from the radical left want to significantly multiply what they're doing now. And what will be the end result is you will totally destroy the beautiful suburbs. Suburbia will be no longer as we know it.
For months, President Trump's campaign has kind of been trying to find a message to really hammer home for his reelection. And as you just heard in that sound we just played for you, it seems like he's settled on an explicit push to scare white suburban voters specifically into thinking they're in danger of losing something he tweeted, calling it their suburban lifestyle dream, with an invasion of dangerous Black, brown, and poor people. Laura, I want to start with you on this one. The president has gone, and a lot of people have talked about this, from a dog whistle to just like full-blown foghorn on this issue recently, right? But this isn't really a new strategy for him.
No, it's not a new playbook for Trump, and it's also not a new playbook historically. It's one that goes back to Barry Goldwater and Richard Nixon in the 60s. And Trump employed this strategy in 2016 to success. His playbook, like Nixon's, is made to do wink and nods to what he calls his silent majority about law and order, and saying that, quote, his suburban lifestyle dream is for his white supporters. So Trump tweets to white suburbia are also in the same pattern, where he's called white nationalists very fine people in Virginia in 2017. And also when he's issued tweets saying that predominantly Black cities are rat infested.
Yeah. Ryan, we're still 96 days away, which feels like a long time, but also feels like right around the corner from the actual election. So there's still plenty of time, but do we have any indication that the campaign really, really believes this is going to work? Or are they just kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks this far out?
Yeah. I mean, a lot can happen in 96 days. Just think what since December, we've had an impeachment, a pandemic, an economic collapse, and wide-scale protests in cities across the country. So, that's the first half of the year. Not only know what's going to happen in the second half. I 2 points about Trump's obsession with the suburbs. And it's obviously all driven by his pollsters telling him that he's bleeding suburban voters, and the coalition that the Democrats won in 2018 remains intact. And that was a lot about the suburbs. But his prescription is completely dated, right? Trump's instinct is to go towards this 60s, 70s Nixonian race baiting strategy. And the American suburbs don't look like that anymore. So the two things I wanted to say about this is, one, they're diverse, right? American suburbs are highly diverse. Anyone that lives in Washington knows this. If you've ever visited Montgomery County or any of the Northern Virginia suburbs, huge Asian American, African American populations. And so he doesn't understand that anymore. The way that the suburbs used to be as sort of pitted against America's big cities, that dynamic is just completely dated. And then, the second thing is that the white populations of the American suburbs don't have the same racial attitudes that they had in the 70s. So he's wrong about that. We've seen a ton of data this year as the anti-racism protests have taken off about white attitudes, and they're just not as retrograde as Trump believes. So I think that's where the strategy sort of falls short. And so far, it's shown no signs of putting a dent in Biden's huge lead in those areas of the country.
Yeah, Tim, the president, and like Ryan just said, has been bleeding support from especially white suburban women for months now, right? In 2018, we saw them become a key voting bloc to give Democrats back the House. But let's be clear, so I want to ask you this, can the president win re-election without those voters? Is there a viable path to 270 for President Trump if he loses white college-educated women by some historic landslide?
So there is, but it is really, really narrow, that path. I think the best way to think about this there are two kind of critical fault lines that run through American politics. One is gender and the other is college education. And those are the two demographic indicators that are increasingly sorting the electorate into these silos, into these tribes, however you want to think about it. And so while it's true that Trump lost college-educated white women by 7 points back in 2016, and then Republicans across the board lost them by 20 points in the 2018 midterms, and that's a terrible trend line, obviously, for the party that could get even worse this fall. Keep in mind that Trump won college-educated white women by non-college-educated white women by 27 points back in 2016. That's an enormous historic margin. And then even in 2018 in the midterms, when the Republican Party got routed, they won non-college white women by 12 points. So the point is that there is a potential here for Trump to offset his miserable standing with college-educated suburbanites with more blue-collar, exurban, and rural voters. And the fact of the matter is that Trump did not maximize his numbers with that latter group back in 2016. For as much of a mythology as there is surrounding Trump's connection with the white working class, he actually left a lot of points on the board. I reported on just that from Scranton, Pennsylvania earlier this week. And I think it's important to realize that for Trump to win this November, he is not going to have to do just as well as he did with white working class 4 years ago. He's going to have to do even better, because we know that these numbers with suburbanites, even if they aren't absolutely sky is falling catastrophic the way that some Republicans fear, they're going to be really bad. And for Trump to overcome those really bad numbers with a lot of white college-educated suburbanites, he's going to have to run up the margins to in a way we've never seen with those blue-collar working class whites in those rural and exurban areas. That's really his only chance, mathematically speaking. And from what we're seeing right now, from what I've seen on the ground recently, guys, it just doesn't look good. The math does not look viable.
Yeah. And I mean, we have something that Trump has to remember is Joe Biden is not Hillary Clinton. So how he's going to do with those exact same voters you're talking about is going to be a little different than how she ended up doing. If you don't watch our show, we have lightning rounds. The first lightning round of the show is Joe Biden and his announcement of VP pick. He has promised that it's going to be the first week of August, which is literally in a few days. In 30 seconds or less, and these are some chatty chads, you guys, so I'm going to have to pull out my phone and pull up when they have to stop talking. Yeah, they talk too much, basically. In 30 seconds
or less. You mean
Tim
and Ryan talk too much?
Look.
Yeah, Laura, we can just never get Laura to pipe down.
No, Laura.
Right. Who's been talking the longest this entire show?
Oh,
wow. Wow.
It's coming in.
It's live. It's real.
Live, exactly. Dangerous. So, Tim, I'm going to start with you. What woman would help him the most that he would choose? And I'm timing you. You can start now.
Who would help him the most? Michelle Obama. She's the most popular woman. But Biden's not going to pick her. So I'll give the boring answer, Kamala Harris. And it's not even that she helps Biden that much. It's that she doesn't hurt him, right? Mm-hmm. She doesn't antagonize the liberal base. She doesn't scare suburbanites. She doesn't drive any great ideological wedge into the party. She's a safe, nationally tested, well-known, do no harm running mate. That's what Biden needs.
Okay, guys, he set it up. That means the rest of you have to do it. I'm going to go to Laura next.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go with Karen Bass because for the Biden camp, she's looking pretty solid. And BLM leaders and progressive leaders that I've spoken to prefer Karen Bass. They want someone, they say, you know, Biden can pick a Black woman who doesn't have a prosecutor or cop history the way Harris and Val Demings do. So they actually prefer her over Harris, and they think that she could help with young voters.
Perfect. Look at this. This timer is really helping me today. Ryan. It is.
I think we tend to focus, there's two considerations, the short term and long term, and we all can tend to focus on the short term electoral issues. And I think Biden, who knows this job obviously better than anyone, will be focusing a little bit more on the governing considerations. And so it'll be the woman who can help him, govern and deal with the multiple crises he's going to have to face in January 2021 if he's president. And that person, I think, is someone with no presidential ambitions for 2024. So
you cut off.
You didn't answer. You didn't answer the question. You didn't answer the question.
Ryan.
Sorry.
Goes over time and doesn't answer the question.
Could you try again?
Who is it, Ryan?
It's the person who will help him govern.
No, give us a name. No, they had to pick a name. No, pick a name. We will sit here all day. Pick a name.
Of the list of people out there right now,
yes,
I would say Susan Rice.
Whoa. Okay.
That's a surprising one.
Hey,
okay.
That is. I'm surprised by that.
Good. Way to hold them to the fire, Eugene.
Exactly. We're not stopping this. The other huge story taking up all of the oxygen all over the country right now is the negotiations of a COVID relief package happening in Congress. At this point, around the country, we've passed 4.3 million cases of COVID-19 in the US, and more than 150,000 people have died from coronavirus in America. Last week, 1.4 million new unemployment claims were filed, and the extra $600 that people have been getting in additional unemployment funds will expire at the end of this month, which is this weekend. Laura, I want to start with you. You used to cover Congress. The deadline has moved week by week for Congress and the White House to get together and pass something to help out of those Americans and businesses still struggling. What issues are holding up the negotiations at this point?
Yeah, so there's a very strong likelihood that they could miss the deadlines. But right now, it comes down to price tag and whether or not they want to do a short-term or long-term fix. So Democrats don't want a stopgap short-term measure in terms of extending eviction moratoriums and unemployment benefits. They want a longer-term solution, and Republicans so far just want a shorter one. Also, Democrats are proposing a $3 trillion coronavirus relief bill overall, and the one proposed by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is $1 trillion. So, and even Republicans within the Senate and House and those negotiating on Trump's behalf haven't fully agreed on that $1 trillion price tag.
Yeah, and on that note, Ryan, Republicans seem to be, just like Laura said, on different pages, kind of all over the place here. And some vulnerable Republicans in the Senate seem to be trying to save themselves from attacks because they have an election to win, right, in a couple of months. And they want to save themselves from attacks that they didn't do enough during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the Republicans are worried about losing the Senate. A lot of the recruiting has broken the Democrats' way. A lot of these Democratic presidential candidates who failed went back and are running for Senate, and they're strong candidates. And so you're seeing a lot of panic. And I think the whole election, whether it's House, Senate, or presidency, is coming down to this one question of what did you do to protect me and my family from the coronavirus pandemic? And so far, President Trump is not really doing so well on that question. What did you do, not just in terms of health, but in terms of beating it back so life could return to normal, so kids could get back to school in the fall. So I think we're seeing, some terrified Republicans, and they're adopting positions, especially some of the senators, backing bigger increases in spending than they would normally be comfortable with. and ignoring President Trump when he, puts down a veto threat, just completely distancing themselves from some of the stuff he's been saying because he's, not seen as doing a great job so far on this.
Yeah. Tim, Democrats are getting some pushback from the more progressive members of their party to do more and to push further in these negotiations, right? How careful do Democrats have to be as they continue to lay so much blame at President Trump's feet for the lack of federal aid, kind of in that same vulnerable Republican position?
Yeah, there are two competing imperatives for the Democrats right now. On the one hand, you have these multiple interconnected crises unfolding across America, crises that are disproportionately affecting some of those core Democratic Party constituencies, and lawmakers obviously want to deliver for those constituencies, as Ryan said. On the other hand, there is just the raw politics of this. Democrats, with less than 100 days to go until Election Day, have President Trump on the ropes right now. He is in terrible shape. The party across the board is in terrible shape, House, Senate, and presidential. And despite throwing a whole lot of stuff at the wall, as you said earlier, Eugene, President Trump really hasn't been able to make anything stick. And I think it strikes a lot of Republicans that Trump's only chance to get back into this race is if Democrats really do him a favor, if they really overreach, if they really over leverage themselves, if they sort of shoot themselves in the foot somehow, some way. And these negotiations that are ongoing in Washington, I think, are a potential minefield for the Democrats. They just have to be careful not to overextend themselves, not to do anything that could be perceived as sort of overly politicizing all of these interconnected crises. Anything they do that helps Trump politically at this point is ultimately going to be counterintuitive in the not very long term. And that's not cynical. That's just the state of politics as they are right now. So Democrats, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, more than anyone, they are walking a tightrope right now, trying to keep a very delicate balance.
Yeah, this is it's already down to the wire. It's going to continue. For viewers, our amazing Congress team, I want to give them a shout out. Stay on the lookout at politico.com for the stories that they're going to be doing and covering as this kind of unfolds. Now for another lightning round. This is my favorite. It's on every show, counter programming. You guys have 30 seconds. Ryan, 30 seconds to take our minds kind of off of the wild world that we're currently living in and give people some news we aren't covering. In this episode, it can be politics or otherwise. We'll start with Tim.
We're going to the wide world of sports, baby.
Per usual.
But specifically, baseball and its restart. More than half of the Miami Marlins active roster tested positive for COVID-19, which caused a 1-week suspension of their schedule and prompting a lot of larger questions about, how durable this Major League Baseball season is with its 60-game schedule. There was so much excitement last week at opening day, so much optimism to actually see these players take the field, and that optimism now feels severely diminished.
Oof.
Seconds.
Just good try. No, you've done it the first time. Let's see if you guys can do it again. Ryan, we're going to start with you, Mr. Don't know how to stop at 30 seconds.
So somehow we completely skipped over the biggest story of the month, which is the new Taylor Swift album, Folklore.
So good. It's so good.
I love, I like the music of this album, but I also love one of the bizarre side effects of the quarantine is that a lot of artists were isolated at home, and it put them in these kind of brooding, contemplative moods, and it's resulted in a lot of great music. And I don't know, I'm a sucker for these stories about boring, lowbrow music stars like Taylor Swift having these kind of like mid-career.
I'm gonna let you finish, Ryan. I'm gonna let you finish, Ryan. But you're wrong. So I'm cutting you off. You're wrong because I got to correct you. The biggest story of the month is happening Friday, and that's Beyonce is releasing a visual film called quote Black is King. I guess it's based on the musical album that she put out when they put out the live action Lion King, but it's described as a visual memoir. So I'm pretty excited for it. It's a celebration of Black culture and Black experience. And it's really what's also interesting is that given that it's Disney putting it out, it is the company's like first real attempt to address the societal confrontations around racism that we're seeing in the country right now.
Yes, and yes, I know Laura went over 30 seconds, but I will never cut off
Did
someone
I? You
talking
didn't,
about
you didn't
Beyonce. I'm not even a timer. We can talk about Beyonce all day.
I'll tell you the time I met Beyonce and Jay-Z.
He did.
Yeah, Ryan. Why don't you tell
want to
us
go with
that
that?
story?
No, we don't have time today.
I thought so.
Ryan, you've just been spending your quarantine in some comfy sweats listening to Taylor Swift.
No, this
Yes.
basically
That's essentially it.
This is really disturbing.
It is a good album. I will give her that. I'm usually not a Swiftie, but I think it's a good. If it takes you off of politics, even though it is a kind of a sad album.
Yeah.
Today was the funeral of civil rights icon and Congressman John Lewis. Before he died, he wrote an essay to be published in the Atlantic Journal-Constitution. And as we head out of the show, I wanted to read some of those words to you today. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful, nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace, and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this very special edition of Foursquare. As always, you can watch us right here every single week, not live, but you can catch our show every Thursday covering politics the only as Politico can. Thanks for watching.